How frequently do you annoy others by fidgeting with your knives? How's it going, everybody? I'm Rollshambo, the connoisseur and collector of all things sharp and shiny. And let me know in the comments section down below, how frequent is it and who is it? Is it your spouse, your coworker, strangers? Let me know. While you're down there, smack the like button. Today, we're talking about the Vero Axon. This specific one is the liner lock edition, and it's been in my possession now, thanks in part to Cursed.EDC on Instagram. Shout out to him for making this possible and for being so generous and patient enough to lend me this knife. But now that it's been here for about a month, I need to send it back. But before we do, you know what time it is. It's time for another episode of Grail or Garbage, the series where I systematically and categorically rank and review knives like this Axon. To give you some context, does it deserve a spot in your pocket? Does it deserve a spot in your EDC rotation? Do you have a rotation? Comment down below. Here's how it works. Grail or Garbage consists of 5 categories. Those categories are materials, ergonomics, fidget factor, the lock, and finally, fit and finish. Each of those categories is worth a max of 10 points. And at the end of ranking them categorically, we'll add up all the scores and then place it on our public leaderboard, which looks like this. By the time we're done, we'll finally know. Is the Vero Axon liner lock a grail? Or is it garbage? Did you know that this is the 41st knife that we will be ranking on the channel? High five if you didn't know that. And if you want to see all 41, well, it'll be 41 now. If you want to see the other 40 knives that I've ranked so far in the last 3 or 4 months, make sure you hit up the description. I will have the public leaderboard listed there. Guys, this is awesome. We're breaking the 40 mark on Grail or Garbage. Make sure you hit subscribe if you want to be here for the next 40. Today, we're going to be talking about this, the Vero Axon liner lock. Now, most people, when they look at the Vero Axon, they're thinking of the frame lock with the titanium. They're thinking about a $370 price tag. So I want to temper expectations. This is the liner lock version. Now, they did exactly what I hoped they would do with this knife, and we're going to get into it, so let's go ahead and start with the first category. The first category is materials. You know, what's the knife made out of? And it goes a little bit deeper than just, you know, what's the blade steel, what's the handle scale material, because we weigh the materials against the cost. We also weigh it against how attainable it is. You know, is it available? And let's talk about the first one for a second. Initially, when I got this knife in, I did some basic research. I went to Vero's website and I saw, hey, you know what? It's a $300 knife. And I was a little bit disappointed. I'm not going to lie to you. I was disappointed because I saw the use of G10 and a liner lock as a way to make this knife more attainable for people, to make it more affordable. And while a jump up from $370 for the frame lock version to $300 for a liner lock version is a jump, I wasn't sure if it was enough to make people actually want to buy this over the frame lock version. So there I was, you know, re-upping on my information after having this in my possession for a month, and I noticed something. Yes, you can get this for $300, but this specific version is $245. Now, there's none of these available at the moment, but they are going to be coming out with more soon. And so if you're okay with the red G10 and the stonewashed M390 with titanium liners, titanium full-length body backspacer, and titanium pocket clip, if this is your jam, then they are going to be coming out with these soon, and I would definitely hit up the Vero website and turn on email notifications, because these are not going to last long at $245. I'm not talking about any of the other ones. Any of the other liner locks. You can get it in carbon fiber, you can get it in micarta, you can get it with a black wash blade, you can get it with the belt satin finish, whatever you want. But if you like this one is the one that I would go for. I'm just going to start off by saying that. Now, we've already gone over the handle scale material, the backspacer, the pocket clip, and the blade. So those are the materials. At a $245 price point, I think that they nailed it. This was the price that I was hoping to see when I initially looked up the information and missed it completely. It's okay, we all make mistakes, and that was one where I can't believe it took me a month to figure out that the one that I had in my possession was at the price point that I thought it would be perfect at. So huge shout out to them for that. The liners, again, titanium with G10 handle scales, M390 blade, titanium almost completely full-length backspacer, and then of course the titanium clip is good enough to get this an 8 out of 10 for materials. Now, if you thought that was good, let's move on. The second category is ergonomics. How does it feel in the hand? And this one's important because if you're going to be carrying this every day, how it feels in the hand is very, very important. Ergonomics is, you know, can you switch up the grip? Can you hold it in multiple positions? Does it make sense? And yeah, for the most part, it does. I will say this on the ergonomics side, while I don't generally have an issue with G10, this G10 is smooth, and you might think that that would actually help with the ergonomics, but in this case, I actually find myself wishing that it was a bit grippier, and it's not. It's very smooth. The smoothness isn't an issue as far as ergonomics are concerned, but as far as it being a user-styled blade, I do kind of wish that they hadn't smoothed out those scales. Secondly, we have to talk about this pocket clip, and the aesthetics behind the pocket clip aren't bad at all. I don't mind the Vero logo on the clip, and I don't necessarily mind how the shape of the clip looks or how it functions in the pocket. You know, it actually fits rather well in the pocket. I know earlier versions, that clip didn't necessarily please a lot of people, and they updated the clip. It fits in the pocket just fine. There's enough flex there. It's going to get past the, you know, the fabric of your pockets. But this lip right here does kind of stand out, and it's not a hot spot per se, but it is noticeable. The moment I start noticing a clip while I'm holding onto a knife is the moment where it doesn't feel as good to me, even if it's not necessarily a true hot spot. Now, as far as how the handle scales are contoured, these handle scales are still slabbish, even though they are contoured. They're not uncomfortable. There's no extra sharp edges except for the one that you want to be sharp. And there is, of course, some jimping. There's no choke up point on here, although you could put your finger right there on the flat, and you know, it's not going to cause a problem at all. The jimping itself is on the shallower side, but I don't think that that's a problem since they're not really encouraging you to choke up on the blade. It's not super uncomfortable. The pocket clip is not a huge detractor, but it is something that I notice. The backspacer helps because you don't have the meat of your hand falling in between those scales and getting pinched, and they don't tell you where to put your fingers. It's going to be good for things like pull cuts, things like draw cuts, and it's going to make sense ergonomically speaking. By no means is this a hard use folder, but you know what, we do have to talk about these things, you know, the different use case scenarios. The ergonomics on here are good, but they're not great, and they're definitely not awful. And so when they're just good, it's just good enough to get a 7 out of 10 for ergonomics. Next up is my favorite category, and that is the fidget factor. And the fidget factor on here is rather good, actually. It's very good, in fact. And a lot of that has to do with the bearings that it's rolling on. Now, the website doesn't say this, but this feels an awful lot like ceramic bearings. It doesn't take a whole lot to get this to flick out. With a very, very lackadaisical flick of the finger, it will fly out. It does have a front flipper option, which is not hard to actuate either. And if you want to be creative, you can do what I like to call the snap deployment, which is rather fun. It will annoy people though, so be careful with that one. Overall, it's really easy to actuate. There's no discomfort when engaging or disengaging the lock bar, which does play a role in fidget factor. It falls shut. The action is running on a single-sided captive pivot, so that's nice. And I'm not getting any Any concerns? This is definitely a knife that you could fidget with both lightly and lightheartedly and not have to worry about it too much. It's not super stabby, and you know, it doesn't take a whole lot of thought to sit here. And so if you like to fidget with it, it's really good for that. This is a very fidget friendly knife. The deployment options are going to be this front flipper tab and this inset fuller, which isn't quite a deployment hole, but it acts the same way as one. The detent is decent. It's decent enough where I don't have to put a whole lot of pressure on those ceramic bearings for it to deploy. I'm going to say that the fidget factor on here is pretty dang good at an 8 out of 10. Now the lock on this is a liner lock, and if you know, you know. I'm not very well impressed by liner locks. They're not heavy duty. There's nothing special about them. They've been designed and redesigned till the end of time, but I can also appreciate a well done liner lock. So check this out. The lockup on here is what I would call about 55%, but it's normal. It doesn't feel like a late lockup. And with easy access to that lock bar, it's very easy and simple to disengage. And it doesn't matter if you flip it out or if you slowly roll it out. The moment it passes that apex, it pops into place and it's very satisfying. The liner itself is titanium, but they do have a steel lock bar interface. So it's hardened steel against hardened steel. And so for those of you who worry about the lock bar wearing out against titanium, you won't have to worry about it wearing out on this one. It's very well set up, and you can tell that an engineering firm designed that because there's a lot of thought that went into that. Really, really cool. As far as the lock, there is no play up and down, left or right. There's no pivot lash, and it centers up perfectly. Nothing less than I'd expect from people who are engineers. So overall, the lock is decent for a liner lock, but it is, at the end of the day, still a liner lock, and for those reasons, it's going to be getting a 7 out of 10. And now we're on to what is probably my second favorite category. And by the way, if you followed up to this point, consider hitting the subscribe button, because we do this all the time. Fit and finish is not just about how well it was manufactured. It's about what was the vision. Can you tell what the vision of the knife design was from the perspective of the people that made it? You know, on this one, it's very clear to me that they had two goals in mind when they made this knife. First was to make it more attainable, not make it cheap, but to make it more attainable. And at the $245 price tag, I feel like they succeeded, while not losing the soul of the knife. There's a lot of situations out there where a less expensive version of a knife kind of looks like the more expensive one that you really wanted, but it just fails. And I don't feel like this one fails. In fact, you do get some benefits from going down from titanium to G10, and that comes in the form of a lower weight. So for those of you who refuse to carry a knife that's over 4 ounces, good news, this one is not over 4 ounces. The action on it is good. There's no compromises made there. The overall design is extremely similar, and another benefit of the liner lock is that you don't have to worry about putting pressure on a lock bar when you're trying to flick it out. And so that's also something to take into account. The pieces that matter are still titanium, like the frame itself. The liners are titanium. The back spacer is full length, that's titanium, and the pocket clip is titanium. And then you've got M390, which is the perennial super steel. And say what you want about M390, but it is indeed widely considered a super steel. And so for $245, you get titanium, M390, G10, you get a single-sided captive pivot, a full-length backspacer, and also a titanium clip. Oh yeah, and screws that are all the same size. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that those are all T8s. So overall, I think that this definitely succeeds in being more attainable without losing the soul of the design, but also offering great value. At the same time, it kind of created a new monster, because this is going to be the more minimalist carry. This is going to be for the person that says, you know what, I don't care, I'm carrying this knife. And I feel like they succeeded there as well. They get huge props for putting their logo on the spine of the blade. I wish more companies would do that. And even though the spine of this blade isn't super thick, they were still able to do that. I did find it a little bit annoying that we have that even though there's no billboarding on the blade itself, which is generally a win, they put a logo there and a logo there. I think that they could have foregone one or the other. And if it were me, I would have chosen to get rid of the logo on the pocket clip, even though it's not a huge deal in my opinion, or put that design on the pivot. Blank pivots definitely aren't a downside to me, but I always feel like a flat top single-sided pivot screw is a great place to put a company logo. So overall, many people will say that this looks very similar to a Brown Jaeger M, but in the end, this is a great knife in its own right. There's a reason why these consistently sell out. Whether we're looking at the frame lock version or the liner lock version, I like the fact that there's a lot of options out there. And for the $245 price point, I think that this one's pretty dang good. I would have liked to have seen more jimping and a little bit deeper jimping. If you're going to put it there at all, make sure that it's useful. But I think that they were successful in their design language, and it's quite clear to me why these sell out pretty easily. And I know at this point I'm just rambling, so let's go ahead and get to the point. The point is that after all of that, the Vero Axon is going to be getting a 7 out of 10 for fit and finish. And you might be thinking, but why? Why only a 7 out of 10? Few things. I disagree with smoothing out the G10. I would have liked to have some more grip there. I think that the extra branding was unnecessary. It would have looked more classy had they just had it in one spot. Or if they do have an extra logo, just put a V on the pivot. And overall, the pocket clip. The pocket clip is not bad, but I feel it, and I feel like a few more tweaks to this pocket clip design could really bring out the ergonomics on here and get it a better overall score. That's why it's a 7 out of 10. Now, we need to add up all of our scores. Where are we? Materials was an 8. Ergonomics is a 7. Fidget factor is an 8. The lock is a 7. And fit and finish is a 7. If you add all of those up, you get a pretty dang good score of 37 out of 50. Now, out of 41 knives now being ranked, 37 out of 50 is enough to put it in the high recommend category. I highly recommend this. Who do I recommend it to? If you're someone that's looking for a good EDC knife with good materials that has things like full-length backspacers, titanium clips, and screws that are all the same size, and you also like this blade shape, this is pretty dang good. Is it the absolute best? I don't think so. I wouldn't call this a Grail by any stretch, but it wasn't designed to be one. Guys, you let me know. Did I nail it? Did I miss the mark? I don't always get it right, and I depend on your comments to let me know. So whether you agree or disagree, let me know in the comments section down below. And if you watch this far, definitely consider subscribing. According to YouTube, a lot of people that watch my entire video don't end up subscribing, even though they come back time and time again. So if you liked the video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, boo-hoo, there's a button for you too. And if you want to see more Grail or garbage and you'll be here for the next one for number 42, make sure you hit subscribe. I'm Rollshambo. I'll catch you on the flip side.